Let's begin with the topic of weighted voting. So let's think about a situation where we have some people assembled together. It could be something formal like a Senate or maybe a committee, and they're looking at what is called a motion. And that means a proposal to take a course of action, to do something, maybe institute a particular law. When you make a motion in a situation like that, there are really only two options. The options are to vote in favor or to vote against, to say either yes or no. We're going to leave aside the possibility of abstaining. We'll say that everyone is forced to commit one way or another, either yes or no, but those are the only two possibilities. And in this situation, the voters will be called players. Now let me immediately have an example, kind of a silly one. Suppose we're having a vote about whether to cancel the final exam for this course. So the motion that's on the table is the exam will be canceled. Now I want you to decide how you would vote. Okay? I don't think it will take you long to make up your mind. And I think probably most of the students, maybe all of the students in the course, would vote in favor of canceling the exam. I should tell you, of course, the instructor also gets a vote, and he's going to vote against the motion. Now, given what the motion says, this means he's saying that there should be a final exam. Okay? Now let's assume all the students have voted to cancel the exam, and the instructor has voted not to cancel the exam, and here's the outcome. No wins. In other words, there will be a final exam. Now you may object to that. You may say, well, how can that be? We had a vote. Well, I forgot to tell you that the instructor has 250 votes. And since there are not 250 students, his 250 votes overwhelm the votes of everybody else. He's what you call a dictator. He has so many votes that his preference decides the election and everybody else's vote is meaningless. Now this was just meant to be a rather simple and extreme example. It's an example of what's called a weighted voting system. So in a weighted voting system, each player is allowed a certain number of votes. This number is called the player's weight. Ordinary voting can be thought of as a special case of this. It's simply the case where each player has weight 1, in other words, a single vote. We're going to call the number of votes needed to pass a motion the quota, and although in the textbook and elsewhere you might see that this is allowed to be something else, we're always going to assume that it's a simple majority. That is to say, at least half and not exactly half, because that would allow the possibility of a tie. So for example, if there are 7 players, each with a single vote, then the quota will be 4. If on the other hand the total number of votes available is 10, then the quota is not 5 but rather 6. Finally, let's look at the notation that we're going to use as we studied weighted voting systems. First of all, the players will simply be numbered. They will be player 1, player 2, and so on, and they'll be denoted by P1, P2, and so on. Also, we're going to assume that the players have been arranged by weight. So one of the players with the highest weight, or the only player with the highest weight, if there is only one, will be player 1, and then player 2 will be the one with the next highest weight, and so on, going down to the players with the least weight. And everything that we want to know mathematically about a weighted voting system can be summed up just by giving some numbers, as we've shown here. This will be our standard notation for specifying a weighted voting system. We'll put square brackets around everything. The first number that's listed is the quota, and then followed by a colon will be the weights of the players in order by their player number. So in this example, player 1 has 5 votes, player 2 has 4 votes, players 3 and 4 each have 3 votes, and then finally players 5 and 6 have 1 vote apiece. Notice, by the way, that if you add these numbers up, you get 17 total votes, and therefore the quota that we've given is indeed a simple majority. It's 9, which is just more than half of the votes available.